He laughed, loud and proud, right in front of his friends. Old man still thinks this is his house. They all cracked up, beers in hand, like it was some kind of stand-up routine. I stood there, holding a tray of hot wings I just pulled from the oven, my hands shaking from more than just age. No one looked at me. Not even him. I forced a smile, set the tray down, and quietly reached into my pocket. The keys were still warm from my grip. I didn't say a word. I just walked out, and locked the door behind me. There was a time, God, it feels like another life, when that boy used to run into my arms the second I walked through the door. Dirt on his knees, hair stuck to his forehead, eyes shining like he'd just discovered gold in the backyard. And maybe he had. Maybe back then, all it took was my smile, or a rough hug, or a story about pirates at bedtime to make him feel like the world was right. I remember those days better than I remember what I had for lunch. Funny how memory clings to what it pleases. His name's Evan. Born 2 months after we laid Marjorie to rest. I remember the nurse placing him in my arms and whispering, "He's strong. You'll be okay." I wanted to scream. My wife had been gone just 61 days. And now here was this tiny, wailing miracle, looking up at me like I had any idea what to do. But I did it. Every diaper, every late-night fever, every tear, every birthday balloon, I did it. I worked construction during the day and rocked him to sleep at night. Sometimes I just sit in Marjorie's old chair with him on my chest, praying quietly, "Tell your mama we're doing okay." We weren't rich, not even close, but I gave him everything I could. When he was 7, I built a treehouse in the backyard. Took me 2 months on weekends, hammering and sawing with him, holding the nails like it was sacred work. He used to call it the castle. Said when he grew up, he'd live there forever and take care of me. He was a sweet boy. Gentle-hearted. I remember one Christmas he saved up coins from raking leaves and bought me a plastic keychain that said, #OneDad. I carried it for 25 years, even after the lettering wore off. By the time he hit high school, Evan still talked to me, really talked. I was strict, sure, but I always listened. He had friends over all the time, and they liked me. Said I told the best ghost stories. He'd bring me broken game controllers or tangled headphones, and I'd sit with a flashlight and fix them while he watched TV. I think he believed I could fix anything back then. We had traditions. Friday night was grilled cheese and tomato soup night. Sunday mornings we'd go to the flea market, walk aisle by aisle even if we didn't buy a thing. Every birthday, I made him pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He'd outgrown it by age 10 but smiled anyway, told me they tasted better that way. College was tough. He went to community college first, said he didn't want to go far. I was proud, but I also saw the change starting. He stopped calling me Dad so much. Started saying, "Yeah, whatever," when I'd ask how his day went. I thought it was just growing pains. Everyone pulls away a little, right? When he met Amanda, it all shifted faster. She was sharp, beautiful in that perfectly poised kind of way, like someone out of a catalog. The first time they visited, she complimented the house, then asked me if I'd ever thought about updating the interior. I brushed it off. But Evan laughed like she'd made a joke. That laugh stung more than I'd admit at the time. Still, I tried. I welcomed her. I gave them space. When he said he wanted to bring her into the house, temporarily, I said yes. He'd lost his job. They needed time. I remembered being young and scared and broke, and I didn't want him to feel alone. That house. I built it with Marjorie. Every inch. We saved pennies and bought land when Evan was just 2. She picked the colors, the tiles, the shutters. I laid the bricks with my own hands, even when they blistered. We planted that magnolia tree in the front yard the year she died, and I watched it bloom every spring like she was saying hello. Letting Evan and Amanda live there wasn't a favor. It was my gift, an open door from a father who still believed in his boy. For a while, it worked. They cooked sometimes. We ate together. I stayed out of their way when I needed to. But little things started to change. I noticed Amanda sighing when I came into the room. Or Evan closing his laptop quickly like I'd interrupted something. I didn't want to believe it, so I didn't. I just kept fixing what broke, cooking what I knew they liked, and being quiet when I felt unwanted. It wasn't until last year that I truly began to feel like a ghost in my own home. But I still remembered the little boy who once fell asleep on my chest, his fingers curled around my thumb like it was a lifeline. And for a long time, that memory was enough to keep me from saying anything. I held on to the good years like a worn photograph, creased at the corners but still clear in the middle. And I believed, truly believed, that all the love I poured into him would come back to me one day. Now I know, sometimes love doesn't echo back. Sometimes it just sinks into the silence and stays there. The shift didn't come like a storm. It came slow, like a slow leak in a pipe behind the wall. You don't see it right away. You just start noticing things aren't the same, and by the time you realize there's damage, it's already rotted deep. At first, it was small things. Amanda started parking in my spot. Every morning for years, I parked under the old maple tree out front. Shade kept the paint from fading. One day, I came home from the grocery store and her little silver car was in my place. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing. But the next morning, and the one after that, it was clear she'd claimed it. I didn't say anything. I just parked down by the curb. Evan used to call me Dad or Pop, that slowly turned into Hey or just Can you. The warmth in his voice cooled. He stopped asking me about my day, stopped telling me about his. We still ate together sometimes, but the silence at the table stretched longer. I'd mention something, like how the tomatoes in the garden were finally coming in, and Amanda would nod, glance at her phone, and shift the topic to something she saw online. Once, I walked into the living room and they were watching TV. I asked, "Mind if I sit?" Amanda didn't even look at me. Just said, "We were kind of in the middle of something." Evan didn't speak. I nodded and went to my room. My own house, and I felt like I had to ask permission to sit in the living room. The thing is, I didn't want to be in the way. I'd been young once. I remembered how suffocating it could feel when your parents hovered. So I gave them space. I made myself small. Started spending more time outside, in the shed or out on walks. I'd sit by Marjorie's magnolia tree and read the paper or just listen to the wind rattle the leaves. But even then, I could feel the distance widening like a crack under the floorboards. One night, I overheard Amanda whispering in the kitchen. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "I can't live like this forever, Evan. We need to move forward." I didn't catch his reply, but the tone of it, it wasn't soft. After that, they started locking their bedroom door. Nothing wrong with that. But the hallway light that used to stay on for me at night? Gone. I'd stumble in the dark if I got up for water. I bought a small night light from the drugstore and plugged it in near my room. Just enough to find my way. Evan stopped helping around the house too. I'd ask him to take a look at the leaky faucet, and he'd say, "I'll get to it this weekend." The weekend would come and go. So I fixed it myself. My knees don't like crouching like they used to, but I managed. I always do. One evening, Amanda had friends over for dinner. I was home, of course. She didn't ask if I'd join them, just told me they were having people, and that it might be loud. I made myself a sandwich and ate in my room. Later, I came out to grab a glass of water and heard her laugh, real sharp. Evan's dad still thinks he's in charge around here. It's kind of cute. More laughter followed. I froze in the hallway, glass in hand. I didn't say a word. Just turned around, went back to my room, and shut the door gently. They never apologized. I never brought it up. My routine started changing. I began walking longer, staying out later. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt like I was borrowing space, like I was the one imposing. But I kept paying the bills. Every light bulb, every water heater repair, every sack of groceries, I covered it without complaint. I even left cash in the kitchen drawer for takeout nights. I thought maybe it would keep things peaceful. That if I made life easier for them, they'd remember who I was. What I'd done. But gratitude doesn't grow in entitlement. I learned that the hard way. There was one moment, just one, when I thought Evan might see what was happening. It was a Sunday morning. Amanda had gone out with friends. Evan came into the kitchen, and I was frying eggs. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. "Smells good," he said. First thing he'd said to me all morning. I offered him a plate. I made extra. He hesitated. Then sat down. We ate in silence for a minute before he asked, "Do you think Mom would have liked Amanda?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at him, really looked. There was a flicker of something there, vulnerability, maybe guilt. I answered as honestly as I could. "Marjorie would have wanted you happy," I said. "But she didn't care much for disrespect. Especially not under her roof." He didn't say anything after that. Just finished his eggs and went back to their room. That was the last real conversation we had for months. The rest of the days blurred together. Amanda began rearranging the house, moved Marjorie's photos into a storage box without asking. Said she was decluttering. Evan let it happen. I found the box in the garage one evening, next to a stack of empty wine bottles. I took it back inside and put the photos back up on the hallway wall. No one commented. But the next morning, they were gone again. That night, I stared at the ceiling in the dark and asked myself the question I'd avoided for too long: when did I stop being their family? The pipe behind the wall had burst. The leak wasn't quiet anymore. It was everywhere, soaking through everything I once thought was solid. And I knew, something had to change. It happened on a Sunday. I remember because I'd spent the morning pruning the rose bushes out front, something Marjorie used to do like a ritual. I'd picked a few fresh blooms and set them in a small vase in the kitchen, just a little color for the house. I don't know why I still did things like that. Habit, maybe. Or maybe it was the only way I felt her near. They were having people over that afternoon. Amanda's friends again, young couples with perfect clothes and too loud laughter. I wasn't invited, of course. I'd learned by then that these gatherings were not meant for me. But I stayed polite, as I always did. Kept to my side of the house, tried not to make too much noise. I didn't want to be a burden. Still, I baked a tray of cookies. Peanut butter, Evan's favorite. Thought maybe I'd leave them out, just to be kind. To remind him that I was still here. That I still cared. I carried them into the kitchen, still warm, still soft. Amanda was at the counter with two of her friends. Evan was behind them, laughing at something one of them said. I set the tray down gently, smiled, and said, "Thought you all might like a little something sweet." Amanda glanced at the cookies like they were a pile of dust. One of her friends leaned over, exaggerated a sniff, and said, "Oh, how vintage. Did your granddad make those?" They laughed. Amanda didn't even try to correct her. Evan didn't say a word. I chuckled softly, trying to break the tension. "I'm his father," I said, meeting her friend's eyes. And yes, I did. That should have been it. Just a small moment. An awkward chuckle and a quick apology. But Evan shook his head and grinned. "Don't mind him," he said. "He still thinks this is his house." Everyone laughed. Loud. Long. And in that second, something inside me, something that had bent and bent for so many years, finally cracked. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. The smirk. The way he looked at his friends, not at me. Like I was just another punchline. Like I didn't matter. I stood there holding a dish towel in one hand, watching their faces twist with amusement, not one of them meeting my eyes. My own son, laughing at me like I was some doddering fool who didn't know where he stood. I couldn't breathe. I didn't say a word. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I just placed the towel down, nodded once, and turned away. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Amanda say, "He gets so sensitive sometimes." And Evan, my boy, my blood, just laughed again. I went to my room. Shut the door. Sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands for what felt like hours. They looked old. Calloused. Veins like rivers beneath thin skin. Hands that had built that house from nothing. Hands that had held him as a baby. Taught him to tie his shoes. Caught him when he fell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the silence press in. And then I got up, opened the drawer where I kept the spare keys, the original set from when Marjorie and I first moved in. I took them out, felt the weight of them in my palm. Then I walked down the hallway, past the sound of laughter that didn't belong to me anymore, and out the front door. I stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the house. The garden. The wind chimes Marjorie had hung by the gutter. I looked at all of it, and then I turned the key in the lock. Once. Twice. I locked the house from the outside. Then I walked down the street, not fast, not in anger, just with purpose. I didn't go far. Just to the park a few blocks away. I sat on the bench under the oak tree where I used to take Evan when he was little. He'd climb the low branches, giggle as I pretended to be a troll guarding the treasure. I remember his laugh then, bright, pure. Nothing like the one I'd heard today. I stayed there until the sun dipped low. Until the cold crept into my bones. And when I returned, the house was quiet. They hadn't noticed I'd left. Or maybe they had, and they just didn't care. But I noticed something. I didn't feel like I was coming home anymore. I felt like I was walking into a stranger's house. A place where my memories had been shoved into boxes, my legacy turned into decoration. I went to my room, locked the door, and sat down. The betrayal hadn't come with a scream or a slammed door. It had come with a joke. A laugh. A moment of public humiliation delivered by the only person I'd ever truly given my whole life to. And the worst part? No one in that kitchen thought I deserved better. Not even him. A few days passed after that joke. No apology came. No knock at my door, no sheepish glance from Evan. Just the same cold politeness in passing. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been humiliated in the very house I built, by the very son I raised. I went quieter after that. I moved like a ghost through those halls, present, but unseen. I kept to myself, but my ears stayed open. And one night, they forgot I was home. It was late, nearly midnight. I'd been sitting at my desk, sorting through old papers, when I heard voices in the kitchen. Evan and Amanda. I know the rhythm of my son's voice, when it's light, when it's nervous, when it's angry. This time, it was flat. Tired. "You said we'd talk to him by now," Amanda whispered. "He's not getting any younger, Evan." I know. I know, Amanda. It's just timing. I don't want it to blow up. She let out a sharp breath. What's to blow up? He can't afford to live here on his own. He's not going to live forever. We need to move forward. He didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "I'll talk to him." We'll make it seem like it's his idea. Maybe offer to help find a nice place. Assisted living isn't some nightmare. My throat went dry. Amanda kept talking, her voice sharper now. If he signs the house over, we could refinance. Get the second story built, redo the kitchen, finally make it ours. God, Evan, we're living in a time capsule. I heard the refrigerator door open. A pause. Then Evan mumbled, he's not gonna just hand it over. Amanda laughed, cold and low. He will. He has no one else. No wife, no siblings. Just us. He should be grateful we're even offering to keep him close. Grateful. That word lodged in my chest like a splinter. I waited until I heard them head back to their room, then sat in the darkness of mine for a long time, listening to the clock tick. I didn't sleep that night. They were planning around me. Scheming. In my house. With my name still on the deed, my hands still cleaning their dishes, still paying the heating bill. And they wanted me out, kindly, gently, legally, but out all the same. I thought of Marjorie. Her smile in the morning light. Her long fingers brushing flour off her apron as she laughed at some joke I barely remembered. The way she'd walk this house like it was sacred. I whispered her name like a prayer that night. Just once. Marjorie. And then I remembered something. Years ago, when Evan was still in middle school, Marjorie and I had talked about updating our will. She'd insisted we include a clause, that the house should never be sold without mutual consent, and that if anything ever happened to both of us, it should go to someone who truly needed it. A family. A cause. Not just inheritance. We never thought he'd treat it like an investment. We thought he'd understand it was a home. A place built from grief and hope and sacrifice. I got up before sunrise, made a pot of coffee, and opened the filing cabinet I hadn't touched in years. There it was, faded, but intact. The old will. I hadn't updated it since Marjorie passed. I stared at our signatures, hers curling and precise, mine heavy and square. I knew what I had to do. I spent the day pretending nothing was wrong. Amanda made herself a smoothie and didn't say a word to me. Evan asked if I'd seen the mail, and I said no. Just normal, hollow small talk. But inside, something had shifted. I began to see things more clearly. Like how Amanda would speak for both of them, even when Evan was in the room. How Evan flinched slightly every time the word ownership came up on TV. How neither of them had asked me about my day in months. I watched them like a man surveying a property line after a flood, checking what still stood, what had rotted, and what needed to be torn down for good. That night, I made a quiet decision. I'd call Mr. Delgado, my old friend and lawyer. He'd handled Marjorie's affairs when she passed. Good man, still practicing. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but something told me he'd pick up. I pulled out my address book, yes, the paper one, and found his number. Dialed it. He answered on the second ring. Tom, he said, voice warm with surprise. Well, I'll be damned. We talked for an hour. I told him everything. The mockery. The overheard plans. The feeling of being erased in my own home. He didn't interrupt. Just listened. And when I was done, he said the one thing I needed to hear. You don't owe them your silence. The next day, I scheduled a visit. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. The next morning, I made eggs like I always did. 3, over easy, with buttered toast. I set them on a plate, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. Not for them, I'd stopped expecting company. I was waiting for the moment I knew would come. The one I couldn't avoid anymore. Amanda came in first, dressed like she had somewhere to be. Business casual, hair tied up, phone in hand. She nodded at me, barely glancing. Morning, I said, voice even. Morning, she replied flatly, opening the fridge. Evan followed a few minutes later, his eyes bleary. Probably hadn't slept well. Guilt'll do that to you, if there's any left in you. I sipped my coffee, then looked up at him. We need to talk. Amanda froze mid-pour with orange juice in her hand. Evan didn't sit. Just stood there, arms crossed. About what? He said. I looked at him carefully. About how you're planning to move me out of this house. Behind my back. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through bone. Amanda spoke first, of course. Who told you that? I raised an eyebrow. No one had to. I have ears. Evan let out a short, dry laugh. It's not like that, Dad. Then what's it like? I asked, folding my hands. Amanda stepped in. You're getting older. You shouldn't be dealing with stairs and yard work. We're thinking ahead, for your safety. Is that what you told yourselves? I said softly. That this was about safety? Evan rubbed the back of his neck. We were going to talk to you. Just, when the time was right. I stood up slowly. You were going to convince me. You weren't going to ask. You already had plans. Amanda wants the house renovated, second story, open kitchen. Your words, not mine. Amanda's eyes narrowed. You were eavesdropping? No, I said. I live here. I built this house. And I'm not deaf. Evan looked away. I took a breath, steadying myself. Let me be very clear, son. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. And not by your hand. You're being emotional, Amanda said, rolling her eyes. No, I replied. I'm being honest. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Save it. I've listened long enough. And what I've heard, what I've seen, makes it clear I've overstayed my welcome. Evan stepped forward. That's not what we meant. But that's what you did, I said. You mocked me. You locked me out. You talked about my removal like I was furniture. He had no answer. That afternoon, I drove into town. First stop, Delgado's office. The man hadn't changed much, just more silver in the hair. He shook my hand, led me into his office, and shut the door behind us. I handed him the old will. I want to update it, I said. Everything. Start fresh. He nodded. Who do you want it to go to? Not my son, I said firmly. Not Amanda. Not after the way they've treated me. I want the house donated after I'm gone. To a cause that means something. We can do that, he said, no judgment in his tone. We worked through the details. I felt every signature like a step on solid ground after months of drifting. When I told him about the clause, contest the will, and everything goes to charity, he raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to go that far? I'm sure, I said. If they try to fight it, they lose it all. He sat back, impressed. You've thought this through. I've been watching, I said. Watching how little they think of me. How easily they treat this house like a prize they've already won. That evening, I came home to silence. I went to my room, locked the door, and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, 2 copies of the new will, one addressed to myself, one to my lawyer. The original would stay locked away in his office, safe. I stared at the envelope for a long time. And I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. Not physically. Something deeper. I had always believed that raising Evan right would be enough. That love, discipline, stability, they'd carry him through. But I never prepared for this part. The part where love was no longer enough. where a son looked at his father and saw a liability. The next day, I got a call from Mrs. Sanders, widow down the street. She asked if I'd be willing to help her with a leaky faucet. I told her I'd be there that afternoon. When I arrived, she met me at the door with cookies. We talked while I worked, about gardens, weather, the way our joints ached when it rained. Before I left, she placed a gentle hand on my arm and said, "You've always been the kind one, Tom. Always." I walked home with her words echoing in my chest. Someone saw me. Someone remembered. At home, Amanda barely acknowledged me. Evan kept his eyes on his phone. They didn't notice the quiet fire building in my chest. But I knew. I had reached the line. And I would not cross it for anyone, not even blood. The office smelled like old books and lemon polish. A quiet kind of place, the kind where voices stay low and every paper means something. Mr. Delgado sat across from me, glasses perched on the edge of his nose, pen in hand. "So, we're finalizing it today?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes. No more delays." He slid the draft across the desk. "Take your time reading it through." The pages felt heavier than they should have. I took a deep breath and began to read, line by line. My name, the property description, the clause on medical decisions. And then the part that stung the most, but felt the most right. I hereby remove Evan Thomas Brewer and Amanda Lee Brewer from any claims of inheritance, property transfer, or financial benefit upon my passing. I stared at that line for a while. It wasn't rage driving this. It was grief. Pure, deep grief for what could have been. What should have been. Delgado cleared his throat. "You're sure, Tom?" "I'm sure," I said quietly. He nodded. "Then let's go over the contingency clause." We moved to the next section, the part that would seal the door shut. Should any person attempt to contest this will, all assets, including the primary residence located at 184 Magnolia Lane, shall be transferred immediately to Veterans Care Initiative, a non-profit organization supporting housing for retired service members. That was Marjorie's idea, years ago. She used to say, "If Evan doesn't want the house for love, let someone use it who really needs it." She'd seen too many friends cast aside in old age, discarded like they no longer had a place in the world. She believed in dignity. In shelter with purpose. I signed the last page. Delgado slid it back, stamped it, and filed it into a folder with my name in thick black ink. "You've done something hard today," he said. "But it's the kind of hard that matters." I nodded. "I don't feel proud." "You shouldn't," he said gently. "It's not about pride. It's about peace." We shook hands, and I left the office with a copy in my coat pocket and a hollowness in my chest that no amount of sunlight could touch. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while the house was quiet. Evan and Amanda had gone out. Likely another dinner with her friends, or maybe a meeting with a contractor. I didn't care anymore. I placed the will copy in the safe behind the bookshelf. Locked it. Then, I took out the photo album Marjorie had made the year Evan turned 10. Each page was filled with laughter. His toothless grin at the lake. His chubby fingers gripping a sparkler on the 4th of July. Me, covered in flour, baking a birthday cake with him. Back then, he used to write me notes, "You're the best dad. I love you." Crayon letters crooked and bold. I pressed my hand to one of the pictures and closed my eyes. I never imagined I'd outlive not just my wife, but the version of my son who loved me. Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to me. A property reassessment notice, standard procedure, but Amanda had opened it. Her note scribbled on the envelope read, "Should look into refinancing this." I took a pen, crossed out her words, and wrote just one back, "No." I left it on the counter. She never mentioned it. The next Sunday, I passed her in the hallway. She was on the phone, speaking low, irritated. No, we haven't brought it up yet. He's being difficult. Yeah, I know. We're working on it. She didn't look at me. But I looked right at her. Later that night, Evan knocked on my door. First time in weeks. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded, motioned for him to sit. He stood instead. Amanda and I have been thinking. You've done a lot. We appreciate it. But maybe it's time to consider the next phase. I didn't flinch. Which phase is that? He swallowed. You know. Less responsibility. More care. Assisted living isn't what it used to be. I leaned back. You know what used to be, Evan? Respect. He looked away, rubbing his hand over his mouth. I've made my decisions, I said. You'll see what they are, in time. But understand this, I will not be moved like a pawn. Not by you. Not by her. He didn't argue. Just stood there a moment longer before nodding and leaving the room. I waited for the slam of the door that never came. Instead, I sat there with my heart both heavy and light. Heavy with the loss. Light with the truth. I'd done what I could. I'd loved as hard as a man could love. And now, I had done what a man must do to protect what remains. Not just the house. But the memory of what that house was meant to be. The straw came on a Wednesday. Not a special day. Not a birthday or anniversary. Just a regular midweek morning when the sun rose like it always did, and I thought, maybe today will be quiet. Amanda had mentioned something about a few friends coming by. That usually meant wine, loud music, and me staying in my room, pretending I didn't live here. But this time, I smelled something off the moment I walked down the hallway. Fresh paint. I followed the scent into the dining room, and froze. The wall where Marjorie and I had hung our wedding photo, the one in the carved walnut frame, was bare. No frame. No hook. Nothing. Just a blank patch of white paint that was still drying, a roller resting in the sink. I looked down and saw a cardboard box labeled Old Stuff. Inside, our wedding photo. My Navy retirement plaque. Marjorie's shadow box with the pressed lilacs from our first garden. All stacked like junk ready for a yard sale. Amanda walked in holding a bucket of brushes. Oh, she said flatly. I didn't think you were home. I stepped between her and the box. What is this? She didn't even look up. We're prepping the dining room. The gallery wall is outdated. Evan and I want a cleaner aesthetic. Minimalism. I stared at the photo of Marjorie, her soft smile captured in faded sepia. You painted over this wall without asking me? Amanda sighed. Tom, you're not the only one who lives here. We need to update the space. This is my home. Her face hardened. No. It was your home. Evan and I are building our future here. That word again. Was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cuss or shout. I simply picked up the box, held it to my chest, and walked out. Later that afternoon, I heard them laughing with friends in the kitchen. Loud, carefree. I opened my door and found the hallway crowded with shoes I didn't recognize. Wine glasses clinked. Someone shouted, "Who's ready for shots?" I walked into the kitchen. Amanda and Evan were standing near the stove, friends all around, the music too loud for conversation. I need to speak with you, I said calmly. Amanda rolled her eyes. Now? Really? I raised my voice, just enough to be heard. Yes. Now. Evan put his drink down. What's going on? I held up the box. You packed away our family's history and didn't even ask me. You painted over a wall Marjorie chose herself. You've made it clear, this house means nothing to you. Dad, it's not like that, he started. It is exactly like that, I said. Amanda crossed her arms. Look, if this is about control, you need to let it go. You've had your time. My fingers tightened around the box. I've watched you slowly turn this place into something cold. I've stayed quiet. I've tried to be kind. But now? You've crossed a line. You're overreacting, Amanda said. I looked at Evan. Do you agree with her? He didn't answer. I nodded. Then I want you both out. Tonight. Amanda laughed, actually laughed. You're joking. No, I said. I want you out. I own this house. I've updated the will. You're not in it. And if you contest it, everything goes to charity. You're done here. The room went silent. Amanda blinked. You're bluffing. I looked at Evan again. Tell her I'm not. His face went pale. He looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. You made your choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. I turned, walked back to my room, and closed the door behind me. I expected a knock. A scream. A plea. None came. Instead, I heard whispers. Frantic. Someone hurried out. The front door opened and slammed. Another set of footsteps followed. Then silence. That night, the house felt too still. Like it was holding its breath. I sat on my bed with the box of memories on my lap, the soft sound of the wind brushing against the windowpane. And I whispered to Marjorie, like I used to. They thought they could erase you, I said. But I remember. And that's enough. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, letting the quiet wrap around me like a quilt stitched with grief and dignity. The next morning, I woke to the sound of drawers opening, closets being emptied. Amanda was moving fast. Evan wasn't talking. They packed with tight jaws and stiff shoulders. Amanda didn't look at me once. Evan lingered by the front door, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His eyes darted around the room like he was searching for something he'd lost. I didn't mean for it to go like this, he said. I met his eyes. But you let it. He looked down. I would have given you the world, Evan, I said. You just had to ask with love. He nodded once. Then walked out without another word. I closed the door behind him. Locked it. Turned the bolt with slow finality. And stood alone in the home I had built, with calloused hands, a grieving heart, and hope that had once burned so bright. I didn't plan to show up. I told myself I wouldn't. That I'd said all I needed to say when I asked them to leave. But something pulled me there, some knot in my chest that refused to loosen unless it was laid bare, not in private, not in shadows, but in the full light of the people who used to look up to me. Who needed to know. Amanda's parents were hosting a dinner party that Friday evening, part celebration, part real estate networking event. I only knew because a neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, mentioned she saw them setting up tables in the backyard with string lights and white linen napkins. You going? She asked innocently, assuming I was invited. No, I said. But I might stop by. I put on my best blazer. The one I wore at Marjorie's memorial. I didn't wear it for them, I wore it for her. For dignity. I slipped the updated will into a manila envelope, along with a small recorder. The same one that captured Amanda's late-night conversation. Not to start a war, but to end one the right way. When I arrived, the backyard was full. Candles flickered on tabletops. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter flowed like syrup. I stood just beyond the gate for a moment, unnoticed. Evan was near the patio, drink in hand, smiling. Amanda was mid-conversation with two sharply dressed women. Then I stepped forward. The laughter didn't stop, not at first. A few people turned. One of Amanda's friends gave me that polite, puzzled smile people reserve for strangers. Evan noticed me next. His smile faltered. "Dad?" Amanda turned, and her expression changed instantly. "What are you doing here?" I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked to the table nearest the center and gently tapped my glass with a spoon. A soft chime. Conversations paused. Heads turned. "Evening," I said. "I won't take much of your time." Amanda stepped toward me, hissing under her breath. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said clearly, for everyone to hear. "I'm finally telling the truth." I held up the envelope. Inside this is a revised will. Dated, signed, and filed with my attorney. It states that upon my death, this house, the one Evan and Amanda were living in, will be donated to a veterans' charity. Neither of them will receive a penny. And if they contest it, the entire estate, including my savings, goes to the charity. The air went dead silent. Evan's face drained of color. Amanda recovered quicker. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said. "What's ridiculous is mocking your father in his own home. Scheming behind his back. Packing away memories like they're trash." I pulled out the small recorder, placed it on the table, and hit play. Amanda's voice rang out, clear as day. "Once the old man's in assisted living, we can redo everything. He'll hand it over eventually. He has no one else." Gasps. Murmurs. Someone said, "That's cold." Amanda lunged forward. "Turn that off." I did. I didn't need to say more. I looked at Evan. "I would have left it all to you, Evan. Every brick. Every tool in the shed. But you let her speak for you. You let her plan to erase me, and you stood there in silence." His mouth opened, but no words came. "You laughed when she mocked me," I continued. "You watched as she moved my wife's photo, my life's work, out of sight. You never stopped her." "I didn't know how to," he stammered. "No," I said softly. "You just didn't want to." Amanda was seething now. "You think this makes you look good? You're just bitter. Alone. That house will rot when you're gone." I turned to the guests, most of them now dead silent. "I may be old. I may even be alone. But I know who I am. And I know what love looks like, and what it doesn't." And with that, I nodded to the host, apologized for the interruption, and walked out. No one followed. That night, back at home, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and sat under the magnolia tree. The sky above was streaked with stars, and the air was still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was free. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. Not because I'd hurt them, but because I'd stood up for myself. Quietly. Dignified. The way Marjorie would have wanted. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house felt different after that night. Not emptier, not colder, just quieter. A kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. The kind that lets you breathe. For the first few days, I expected something. A knock at the door. A letter. A phone call from Evan, maybe even from Amanda's father, embarrassed by the public spectacle. But nothing came. Not even silence meant for peace. It was the kind of silence meant to punish. But it didn't hurt like I thought it would. Not anymore. I'd already grieved the son I thought I had. This was just the echo. I went back to my routines. Woke up at 6. Made coffee. Fed the birds in the backyard. I even fixed the squeaky gate that had bothered me for months. With no one around to walk through it but me, I figured it deserved the attention anyway. The town buzzed, though. Word got out quickly. That's the thing about small communities, truth travels just as fast as gossip, and sometimes they ride the same bus. At the hardware store, one of the younger clerks, Billy, clapped me on the shoulder. "Heard what you did. Wish my granddad had that kind of backbone." At church, a few of the older ladies gave me those soft, knowing looks. A few even invited me for dinner. "You shouldn't be alone, Tom," they said. But I wasn't. Not in the way that mattered. One afternoon, while trimming the bushes along the front path, I saw a little boy walking home from school. He stopped, looked at the treehouse still barely standing in the old maple, and asked, "Did you build that?" "I did," I said. He grinned. Cool. A moment. Small. But it warmed something in me that hadn't felt sunlight in a while. Later that week, I found myself standing in Marjorie's old sewing room. Amanda had turned it into her office, sleek desk, no warmth, no memory. But now it was bare. Empty walls, hardwood floors, a faint scent of her perfume clinging to the curtains she'd never bothered to take down. I pulled open the closet and found some of Marjorie's old boxes still stacked behind the newer junk Amanda had left. Inside were spools of thread, unfinished quilts, and a photo album I hadn't seen in years. I sat right there on the floor, flipping through it. Pictures of Marjorie in every season, her with Evan at the pumpkin patch, her baking pies with flour on her nose, her standing in this very room holding up a half-stitched baby blanket. I ran my fingers over the page. "I did right by you," I whispered. "I hope that counts for something." The next morning, as I was sweeping the front porch, someone called out, "Mr. Brewer?" I turned. A girl, maybe 20, stood at the gate. Her hair was long and curled at the ends, and she had Evan's eyes. I recognized her immediately, Lily. My granddaughter. She hadn't visited in years. Not since she was a teenager. I remembered her as a shy thing who liked to draw butterflies and sit in the magnolia tree with a book. "Lily," I said, stunned. She smiled nervously. "I hope it's okay. I saw everything online. Heard what happened." I opened the gate. "Of course it's okay." She came in, and for a moment, I saw her eyes scan the garden, the porch, the house. "It still smells like her," she said softly. "Like Grandma." I nodded, throat tight. I like to think she never left. We sat in the kitchen, and I poured us some lemonade. She looked older, more sure of herself, but gentler than her parents. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She just wanted to be present. "I'm sorry about Dad," she said. "He's not proud of what happened." "Is he sorry?" I asked. She hesitated. "Maybe. But I think he's more angry you stood up to him." I let that sit between us. "I'm proud you did," she said. That's when I let myself smile. She looked around again. "I don't want anything from you. Just, if you ever want company, I'd love to visit sometimes." "You're welcome any time," I said. And I meant it. When she left, I watched her walk down the street like I used to watch Evan head to the bus stop. Same posture. Same long legs. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope. That evening, I stood in the doorway of the sewing room and looked out at the hallway. The silence still lived there. But it no longer felt like an absence. It felt like a pause, before something new. It started with a knock at the door one Saturday morning. I was in the back garden, trimming dead leaves from the hydrangeas, when I heard it, 2 firm raps, no hesitation. I dusted off my hands and opened the door to find Reverend Carter standing there in his usual navy windbreaker and church slacks, holding a clipboard. "Tom," he said with a smile, "we're starting a housing outreach for local veterans." I remembered what you and Marjorie used to say about this place being a haven. I blinked. That was 20 years ago. He chuckled. Ideas don't expire, my friend. He stepped inside and looked around. It's still beautiful. Big, too. Have you ever considered opening it up? I leaned on the kitchen counter and let the idea breathe for a minute. It wasn't new. Marjorie and I had talked often about turning the guest room into a space for someone who needed it. A traveling pastor, maybe, or a young couple down on their luck. But life got busy, and then she was gone. And now, I had the space. And the quiet. That afternoon, I walked through the house as if seeing it for the first time. Marjorie's sewing room. The den Amanda tried to turn into her content studio. The sunroom Evan once used for video games. All empty now. Waiting. I called Reverend Carter the next morning. Tell me more, I said. The plan was simple, a pilot program to house retired veterans transitioning out of assisted living or homelessness. They'd contribute what they could, help with upkeep, share meals. It wasn't a boarding house, it was a partnership. It was dignity. That word again. The one Marjorie always came back to. We set up a meeting with Veterans Care Initiative, 3 polite, no-nonsense people who asked thoughtful questions and didn't make promises they couldn't keep. When I showed them the backyard, their eyes lit up. You've got good bones here, one of them said. And a heart to match. By the following week, we were planning room assignments. Light renovations, nothing fancy. Just safety rails, a new bathroom in the old utility room, fresh paint. I called Billy from the hardware store and asked if he knew any young workers looking for a few side jobs. By Friday, I had 3 teenagers on the porch, tools in hand, asking what needed fixing. I'll pay you fair, I said. But I expect respect. One of them grinned. Yes, sir. We started with the guest room. Repainted the walls, brought in a new mattress, hung fresh curtains. I moved Marjorie's lilac quilt to the foot of the bed, she'd have liked that. As the house transformed, so did I. Every morning I woke with purpose again. My hands ached from hammering, my knees groaned with every stair, but my heart? My heart was alive. Neighbors stopped by to help. Mrs. Delaney brought casseroles. Reverend Carter donated a bookshelf. Even the mayor's wife dropped off a stack of gently used coats. One afternoon, as I was planting new bulbs in the front yard, Lily showed up again. I heard, she said, eyes wide with wonder. You're turning it into something bigger than yourself. I'm just following your grandma's footsteps, I told her. She knelt beside me and helped dig. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The first resident arrived 2 weeks later. His name was Frank, 70, quiet, polite. A Vietnam vet with kind eyes and a limp from an old injury. He brought a single suitcase and a book of crossword puzzles. You sure I'm not intruding? He asked when I opened the door. Frank, I said, shaking his hand, you're home. That night, we ate meatloaf at the table Marjorie and I once picked out at a flea market. Frank told stories about the Navy. I listened with the quiet attention I used to give Evan when he was small. More veterans followed. Henry, a soft-spoken man with a love of birdwatching. Curtis, who fixed the kitchen light without being asked. They each brought something, not just their presence, but their stories, their time, their respect. Within a month, the house was full of life again. Not the noisy kind. Not the arrogant kind. The honest, lived-in kind that warms the walls without staining them. One evening, I stood in the doorway of the dining room and watched them pass dishes, joke softly, swap stories. No one raised their voice. No one disrespected the space. And I thought, this is what a home is supposed to feel like. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade and looked up at the stars. Marjorie's magnolia swayed gently in the breeze, petals just beginning to fall. "I think you'd be proud," I whispered. I didn't hear her voice. But I felt something in my chest settle. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, and for once, that was a good thing. Curtis was up early most mornings, already fixing something before I'd had my first sip of coffee. Henry kept the bird feeders full and had memorized the names of every species that landed on the fence. Frank swept the porch every evening, slow and methodical, as if he was polishing something sacred. We weren't related. Not by blood. But there was more family in that house now than there'd been in years. No one raised their voice. No one rolled their eyes. No one told me I was outdated or in the way. Instead, there were thank yous. Shared meals. Quiet, respectful laughter. Even the silence was good, it was the kind that let you breathe, not the kind that made you feel small. One Thursday morning, I found a note on the kitchen table, written in neat, blocky handwriting. "Tom, fixed the back steps. Hope you don't mind." They were creaking. "Curtis." I smiled and folded it into my shirt pocket. Later that day, we all sat on the porch together, watching the sun dip behind the magnolia tree. Frank said something about the way it caught the light on the petals, and Henry nodded like he'd just seen something holy. I thought back to all those nights I sat alone in this same spot, hearing laughter that didn't belong to me. Conversations that moved around me like I wasn't there. But now I was seen. I was heard. And not because I demanded it. Because I earned it. The men never pried about Evan or Amanda. They must have heard whispers from the neighbors, maybe even from Reverend Carter. But they never brought it up. They respected the boundaries, and that meant more to me than any apology ever could. Still, there was one night that caught me by surprise. I was closing the front gate when I saw her. Lily. She stood at the sidewalk, holding a grocery bag and wearing a cardigan too light for the cold. "I brought cookies," she said, lifting the bag sheepishly. I smiled. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She followed me inside, and the house welcomed her in that quiet, peaceful way it had learned. Curtis tipped his cap. Frank offered her tea. Henry showed her the latest sketch he'd been working on, a drawing of the magnolia tree in bloom. She laughed and said it looked like something out of a storybook. We sat in the kitchen while the others drifted off to their rooms. She sipped her tea and looked around like she was memorizing the feel of the place. "It's different," she said softly. "But it feels right." "It does," I agreed. She looked down into her cup. "Dad's not doing great." I said nothing. "He won't say it, but he misses this place. He drives by sometimes. Parks down the street." That didn't surprise me. Pride is a bitter thing, it makes you circle what you've lost without ever knocking on the door. "He talks about the house like it's a thing," she continued. "But I think he misses the home. Or maybe just the version of you he used to know." "I didn't change," I said. "He did." "I know," she whispered. She stayed for an hour. We didn't talk much about the past. We talked about books, and music, and the future. She said she was thinking of studying to become a therapist. "People need someone to listen," she said. "And not judge." I looked at her, really looked at her. She had her father's eyes, but none of his edges. She'd grown into someone good. Someone strong. "You've got a home here," I told her. "Always." Her eyes welled up. She nodded. Before she left, she hugged me. Not out of pity or guilt, but out of love. The kind that wraps around your ribs and holds you together. After she was gone, I stood in the hallway, her scent still lingering faintly in the air. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Forgiveness. Not for Evan. Not yet. But for myself. For staying too long in a version of the past that no longer existed. For hoping a broken relationship would fix itself out of obligation. For not seeing sooner that blood doesn't guarantee love. That night, Curtis called from the den, "We're watching an old western if you want to join." I did. We watched in companionable silence, old boots on the coffee table, popcorn in a plastic bowl, someone snoring by the second act. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it was mine. Not because I owned the house. But because I finally understood what makes a family. It's not who shares your name. It's who shares your values. Who sees you. Stands with you. Shows up not because they have to, but because they want to. The knock came on a rainy afternoon. Not a loud one. Not urgent. Just 3 soft raps against the old wood of the front door. I was in the sunroom, sipping tea and listening to the gentle patter of the storm against the windows. Frank had just gone down for a nap, and Curtis was busy fixing the pantry shelves. I stood slowly, my knees creaking the way they always did when the weather turned. By the time I reached the door, I already knew who it was. Evan stood there, damp from the rain, hair matted, hands in his pockets. "Hi, Dad," he said. I didn't answer right away. I studied him like a stranger might, his tired eyes, his hesitant posture, the weight he seemed to carry in his shoulders. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. Not out of duty. Not out of warmth. But because I wanted to hear what he had to say. Whatever it was, I needed to hear it with my own ears. He walked in slowly, looking around. "It's different." "It is," I said. "But it's whole now." He gave a tight nod, as if he understood. We sat at the kitchen table, across from each other. The same table where I used to serve him dinosaur-shaped pancakes. The same table where I'd once overheard plans for my removal. He looked down at his hands. "I've been driving by," he said after a while. "I know Lily told you." "She did. I wanted to come sooner. But I didn't know how." "Opening the door isn't the hard part," I said. "It's what you bring through it." He looked up at me, and for a brief second, he was my son again. Not the man who mocked me. Not the man who stood silent while others disrespected me. But the boy who once held my hand in a thunderstorm and whispered, "Don't let go." "I messed up," he said. "I let her talk for me. I let her plan things I didn't stop. And when you stood up for yourself, I should have been proud of you. But I was embarrassed. Not because of what you did, because of what I didn't." I let his words settle. I wasn't rushing to forgive him. I wasn't rushing to anything. "You watched me shrink in my own home," I said quietly. "And said nothing." "I know. You laughed when she mocked me." "I know," he said again, voice cracking. "And when I asked you to leave, you went without a fight." He took a shaky breath. "Because I knew I didn't deserve to stay." The rain outside softened into a mist. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," he continued. "I don't want the house. I don't want your money. I don't want it to end with silence." I looked at him long and hard. "You chose silence when I needed your voice," I said. "You chose convenience when I needed courage." "I was weak," he said. "And selfish." I nodded slowly. "Yes. You were." He looked away, ashamed. "But you came back," I added. He glanced at me again, surprised. "And that matters more than you think," I said. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. "Then you're smarter than I thought." That made him chuckle. Just once. A dry, tired sound. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I'm not forgetting either. Some wounds don't close clean. They scar." He nodded. I understand. I've found something good here, Evan. Not what I imagined. But better in ways I never expected. I can see that. You and Amanda? I asked. Separated, he said. Maybe permanently. I don't know. Doesn't matter, really. He stood slowly. I should go. I walked him to the door. Just before he stepped out, he turned to me. Lily still comes by. She does. She asks about you. She's a good one, he said. Didn't get it from me. No, I said. She got it from watching What Not to Become. He nodded, accepting it without flinching. Then he paused, and with a voice almost too quiet to hear, he said, "You were a good dad." I met his eyes. Still am. For those who want me. He opened the door and stepped into the rain. I watched him walk down the path, not looking back. The magnolia tree shook slightly in the breeze as he passed beneath it. I didn't feel closure. I felt clarity. He came. He owned his shame. And he left with it. No hugs. No dramatic apologies. Just the truth, spoken plainly. And that was enough. Has someone ever come back too late? Share your story in the comments. The ceremony wasn't fancy. Just folding chairs on the lawn, coffee in mismatched mugs, and a homemade banner that read "Welcome Home" strung between two trees. The veterans were all there, Frank in his best collared shirt, Curtis freshly shaved for the first time in weeks, and Henry with a new pair of reading glasses he kept adjusting nervously. Reverend Carter stood near the magnolia tree, holding a clipboard he never once looked at. And I stood on the front porch, looking out at the house Marjorie and I once built with sweat, dreams, and more love than we ever knew what to do with. Lily helped plan the whole thing. She made flyers, invited neighbors, even wrangled a few local reporters. People should hear stories like yours, she told me. Stories where people stand up for themselves and still choose love after. I didn't argue. Even Evan showed up, though he stayed in the back. He didn't make a scene. Just stood quietly, hands folded, and nodded when I met his eyes. That was enough. I stepped up to the porch rail when it was time to speak. I hadn't prepared a speech. I didn't need one. I want to thank you all, I said, voice slow but steady. Not just for coming, but for being part of this house's second life. I glanced at the men seated on the lawn. For a long time, this place was just walls and memories. Then it became a place I wasn't sure I belonged anymore. And now it's become a home again. A true one. I paused. I named this house Marjorie's house not because she built it, but because she was what made it home. Every wall holds her touch. Every room echoes with her kindness. And I think she'd be proud to know it's become a place where people are safe again. Seen again. Loved again. I stepped back to quiet applause, more heartfelt than loud. Reverend Carter unveiled the small bronze plaque we had installed near the front gate. It read, "Marjorie's House. A home built by love. A haven restored by dignity. In memory of those who gave, and those still giving." There were a few tears. Not many. Just enough. The local paper took photos, neighbors shared stories, and someone brought a homemade pie that tasted exactly like something from a county fair. Frank offered to wash the dishes before anyone asked. Curtis gave a short tour of the renovated back room to a group of curious visitors. Henry set up a chair in the garden and began sketching the crowd with a look of quiet purpose. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting golden light across the house, I walked through the rooms one more time. The air smelled like fresh bread and coffee. Someone had left their jacket on the coat rack. There were voices in the kitchen, soft, warm, familiar. It felt alive. Not perfect. But whole. I made my way to the sunroom and sat in Marjorie's old rocking chair, the one Amanda once tried to move to the garage. It creaked the same way it always had. I looked out at the magnolia tree, now shedding the last of its blooms, petals like little love notes drifting down to the grass. And I spoke, just loud enough for her to hear. "We did it, Marjorie." I closed my eyes and breathed in deep. I didn't need revenge to feel peace. I didn't need to win to feel whole. I only needed to remember who I was, and live like that meant something. And in doing so, I found a family. A real one. The kind that shows up. The kind that listens. The kind that turns a house back into a home.